They say the soul feels heaviest just before the truth is spoken. Perhaps that explains why, as I pushed open the creaking chapel door, my heart was thunder in my chest. My footsteps, punctuated by the echo of heels, whispered secrets into the hallowed silence. For this was no ordinary night, and what burned within me was no simple plea for forgiveness. It was midnight, the hour when shadows breathe and restraint melts under the weight of all things unspoken. I wore black, sheer fabrics layered like the night sky itself, not for mourning, but for the transgression I was about to entertain. Still, I told myself I came to pray. I told myself God would understand, forgive, absolve. But my fingers, trembling beneath their delicate lace gloves, bespoke another truth entirely. They ached not for penance, but for contact, for the warmth of a touch I had no right to crave. The altar was glowing softly with the golden pulse of a single flickering candle. And then, as if some unknowable force drew us together, I saw him, alone, head bowed, his hands resting on the edges of an aged Bible. His name was Aelric, but to the world, he was known only by the cloth he wore, the priest, sacred, untouchable. Or so I thought. As though sensing my presence, he looked up, and in that single gaze, those midnight eyes holding mine like chalices of forbidden promises, I felt the first thread of my resolve unravel. We stayed frozen, neither speaking, for what felt like lifetimes stitched together in moments. Setting my hand against the pew for steadiness, I broke the silence with the only words that felt honest enough to shatter the tension. "Forgive me, Father," I whispered, voice trembling with a tremor I could neither hide nor explain. "For I am about to sin." For all his training and poise, Aelric flinched. His throat moved with a hard swallow, but no judgment fell from his lips. In that instant, he was just a man watching me close the distance between us. My heels clicked softly on the ancient stone floor, echoing a rhythm akin to restrained heartbeats. I told myself I would keep my distance, but my body betrayed me. My gloved fingers reached out, brushing against his hand where it rested, still warm from the communion of Scripture. They say sin begins in the mind, but I knew mine began the moment he didn't pull away from my touch. "Your hands," I murmured, scarcely aware of my own voice as the words slipped from my lips unbidden. They were made for more than Scripture. The tightening of his jaw was answer enough, but even in his reluctance, I saw the sharp internal battle mirrored in his posture, the stiff set of his shoulders, the twitch of tension in his fingers. It was a fight he was losing, though neither of us could admit it out loud. The briefest flicker of hesitation broke as I leaned closer, close enough to smell the faint, bittersweet traces of incense clinging to his robes. "Do you still think?" I whispered, almost daring him to look away. "That I came here seeking salvation?" The stillness that followed could have split the night in two. And then, his liberation, or was it his undoing, came not with words, but action. The candor of longing breached the barrier of restraint as he stepped forward. His lips, soft and tempestuous, met my shoulder in something that barely constituted a kiss, hesitant, holy, and yet undeniably hungry. I barely remember what words were spoken after that, or what prayers might have died unuttered. Only names, only small gasps, only the silence that blooms in breathless spaces between sanctity and sin. His hands, for the first time, abandoned their pious station to hold me. My waist, my arms, my face. For him, I wasn't an invader of sacred ground, but a craving woven into his being, as if destiny had perched me at the precipice of his devotion. What bloomed in that chapel that night, it wasn't love, nor could I bring myself to call it mere lust. It dwelled in an unlit corner of human desire, a craving that was almost too burdensome, too primal to categorize. And then, it ended. Or rather, it ceased to awaken the air. Exhausted, the room settled into breaths juxtaposed by both relief and devastation. Before leaving, I kissed the small cross he wore around his neck, cold, unyielding metal under trembling lips. But he turned from me without a word, the pain of his human imperfection written in every line of his shadowed face. What could either of us say, after what had just transpired? The next morning when I returned, the chapel stood hollow, emptied of both him and the intangible magnetic pull he'd left behind. Any traces of him were as ethereal as the incense hovering faintly in the air. The singular candle from the previous night still burned, but its flame had been reduced to a wavering, fragile glow that barely fought the encroaching darkness. It was then I came to realize the truth, not about God, and not about sin, but about honesty. We had both entered that chapel looking for a confession of some kind. I, for absolution. He, perhaps, for the strength to abide by his sacred vows. Yet neither of us emerged as we had expected. Instead, we found clarity, a freedom not in being forgiven, but in surrendering to the exquisite, damning weight of our humanity, to the hunger of being undeniably alive. I left that day as I had the night before, clutching a heart burdened not with regret, but with remembrance. Some sins, I realized, are never meant to cry out for redemption. Some sins, like the moments Elric had kissed words unspeakable against my skin, exist only to mark us, stake their claim, and never fade. Not all sins cry for redemption. Some just want to be remembered.